Greetings, everyone, from Chippewa Falls in beautiful western Wisconsin, and welcome to another episode of Hidden Chippewa Valley. My name is John Kinville, and as always, if you'd be willing to subscribe to this channel and like this video, it would be greatly appreciated. Today I'm standing at the famous Northern Wisconsin State Fair in front of its main grandstand. On this site, in 1935, there was an epic football battle that took place on this very spot. You see, there were seven men who played here that day who are currently enshrined in the NFL's Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. One of those men was a rookie, and he played his first game right here. Today he is considered by many to be the greatest wide receiver in NFL history. I hope you will join me, as today we are going to explore a game between the semi-professional Chippewa Marines and the NFL's Green Bay Packers.
Today's episode is sponsored by Drone Crony. If you are looking to capture stunning aerial photos and videos, whether it be for personal, business, residential, agricultural, industrial, or commercial, the Drone Crony's professional drone photography and video services will be perfect for you. Owned and operated locally in western Wisconsin, I can personally vouch for the work and creativity that owner Joe Nelson brings to his drone craft. You can sample more of Joe's work at dronecrony.com and reach out to him at dronecrony@gmail.com. And don't forget to tell him that Hidden Chippewa Valley sent you. Thank you, Joe, for supporting the program and for all that you do for folks in the Chippewa Valley. On Monday, September 2nd, 1935, the citizens of western Wisconsin experienced a Labor Day event unlike any other held before or since. On the grounds of the Northern Wisconsin State Fair in the city of Chippewa Falls, thousands of fans watched as a local semi-professional team, the Chippewa Marines, faced off against a professional one, the National Football League's Green Bay Packers. Yes, you heard it right, those one and the same Green Bay Packers. Unbeknownst to most that were in attendance that day, this preseason exhibition game would feature 16 future Green Bay Packers team Hall of Famers, 7 of which would see eventual enshrinement in the NFL's Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And if that weren't enough, fans in attendance didn't know it at the time, but they had borne witness to the start of one of the greatest careers in professional football history. In this episode, we will explore the unlikely, yet incredibly true story of an epic football battle that took place between the Chippewa Marines and the Green Bay Packers in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. The story of this historic matchup began 5 years earlier, in August of 1930. Coming out of the football craze of the 1920s, a group of former local high school football stars from Chippewa Falls Public High School and McDonald Catholic High School met in the Wisconsin Army National Guard Building, or Battery C Armory, located at 45 East Elm Street, near the Jacob Leinenkugel Brewing Company in downtown Chippewa Falls. There they discussed the formation of a semi-professional football team that would solely represent the city of Chippewa Falls. They named themselves the Chippewa Valley Marines, or the Chippewa Marines, in tribute to both the U.S. Marine Corps as well as their self-described determination to fight and win all of their future games. The charter members of the Marines included locals Carl Mells, Vernon Anderson, Jim Hart, Reinhold Hoppe, Dutch Bromeisel, Melvin Wang, Don Luloff, Leo Steinmetz, Herman Rasmus, Dick Armstrong, and Maury Martell. Wearing uniforms financed by various patrons and area local businesses, including the Chippewa Woolen Mill, the Marines practiced on a field near the downtown armory and played their home games in front of the main grandstand of the Northern Wisconsin State Fair on the city's East Hill. During their first 5 seasons, the semi-professional Marines dominated their regional competitors and saw more and more players from Midwestern state colleges join their ranks. Instead of just local talent, so far the most famously known Marine had been the fullback Eddie Kotel. known as the Lawrence Flash, who had won an NFL championship with the Green Bay Packers in 1929. The most popular Marine, however, by far, was a local alumnus of the city's public school, Chippewa Falls Senior High School's very own Carl Mells, who was known more by his nickname, Hoot. As a team, the Marines played an ever-changing menagerie of other semi-professional upstart regional teams, including the Stanley Orioles, Ladysmith Bears, Hudson Phillips 66, Shawano Indians, New London Bulldogs, Little Chute Flying Dutchmen, the Minnesota Minnehaha's, and the Clintonville Four-Wheel Drives. The Marines compiled a record of 38 wins and only 3 losses and 4 ties in their first 5 seasons, putting up a respectable 84% winning percentage. Heading into the 1935 season, the Marines had developed a reputation as a hard-nosed defensive juggernaut and were nicknamed the Beef Trust by the local newspaper because of their size and ferocity. Their fiercest rival were the La Crosse Old-Style Loggers, who always competed with the Marines in having the best overall record each year. As the Marines' successes on the field grew, so did the attendance numbers, corporate sponsorships, and civic recognitions. One prominent Green Bay, Wisconsin resident also took notice of the team from the other side of the state. His name was Earl Louis Lambeau, but everyone around the state and the nation knew him as Curly Lambeau, the head coach and manager of the NFL's Green Bay Packers professional football team. On July 10, 1935, the Chippewa Marines met at the Elks Club and officially reincorporated for an upcoming 6th season as a semi-professional team in business. Just 2 weeks later, the Northern Wisconsin State Fair Association announced that they would play host to a special Labor Day exhibition game between the hometown semi-pro Chippewa Marines and the NFL's professional Green Bay Packers. Emblazoned on the top of the Chippewa Herald-Telegram's front page newspaper, never before had such a notable sports development ever befallen the western Wisconsin city. The fair, meanwhile, was eager to highlight their new field improvements, as well as an expanded grandstand that now held up to 8,000 spectators, assuming the Packers would not cancel their participation at some point, as many thought they would. The game promised to be a profound financial opportunity for all parties involved, including the fair, the city, the Marines, and the Packers. As Labor Day approached, both gridiron franchises began their formal trainings. On August 24th, Curly Lambeau and 24 of his players boarded a bus in Green Bay and traveled some 140 miles northwest to Rhinelander, Wisconsin. After winning 3 consecutive NFL championships in 1929, 1930, and 1931, the first time an NFL team had ever won a three-peat, the Packers went on to finish third, and second in their subsequent seasons. To get his team back into championship form, Lambeau decided to hold training camp way up north in Oneida County, Wisconsin, as far away from the normal environs of Green Bay as possible. He hoped the escape and partial seclusion would enhance the team's chemistry. In addition, Lambeau also scheduled a handful of exhibition games against semi-professional teams from around the state. Known as barnstorming, where a team could both practice for the regular season and grow their franchise's brand in their home state, Lambeau's Packers had scheduled 3 exhibition games in the cities of Merrill, Stevens Point, and La Crosse. While in Rhinelander, Lambeau received an invitation letter challenging his Packers to come to play the semi-pro Marines in Chippewa Falls. Not one to easily back down from a respectfully worded challenge, Lambeau agreed and added Chippewa Falls to his team's exhibition schedule. In preparation, Lambeau's Packers stayed in 4 cabins at the Pinewood Lodge on Lake Thompson, with 6 players lodging together per unit. Each day at 2:30 p.m., the team bus drove to Rhinelander High School, where the team practiced on Soroka Field in front of the hundreds of curious and excited locals, with concessions offered by the local Boy Scouts of America. When not training and practicing, the team enjoyed fishing, card playing, and a strict 11 p.m. curfew. After a week in Rhinelander, the Packers left training camp for an exhibition game against a semi-professional team in Merrill, Wisconsin, just north of Wausau. To this day, this is the only time the Green Bay Packers ever had training camp outside of the Green Bay area. With the big Packer-Marines game just days away, and with local media interest in the matchup having intensified to a fever pitch, Chippewa Marines head football coach Carlton Rolls secluded his team at a private training camp just a mile or so from the fairgrounds. A who's who of area businesses and residents provided Rolls the financial support he needed, including Northwestern Bank, Jacob Leinenkugel Brewing Company, Skogmo Cafe, A&W Root Beer, Soakup's Market, the Hotel Northern, Gutnick's Market, Red Owl Grocery, and many others. Coach Rolls, who worked locally as a junior high school physical education teacher, knew his work was going to be cut out for him, going toe-to-toe against the famed Curly Lambeau. Rolls rented 2 of Sam Melville's cottages on the eastern side of Glenlock, located across the lake from the city's famed Irvin Park. His initial roster of 17 young men split 2 cottages, bunking 9 men per bungalow. As Rolls waited for some more college talent to join his team later in the week, he put the men in attendance through a rigorous series of 2-a-day trainings, first starting at 9 a.m. and the other starting at 4 p.m. Rolls had his men engaged in dummy machine drills, passing and punting exercises, and team scrimmages. The Chippewa Herald-Telegram reported that the men all appeared enthusiastic, in good physical condition, and brown as Indians from the sun. Talent-wise, however, one player on Coach Rolls' team stood out from all the rest, and it wasn't even close. At 6 foot 1 inch, weighing 188 pounds, a recently signed star halfback named Johnny Blood McNally could throw, kick, catch, block, tackle, and run better than anyone else on the roster. Former Marines teammate Hoot Mells recalled, "He was just all around special." Blood's short-lived presence on the semi-professional Chippewa Marines was a merging of both the bizarre and the genius. Having helped the Packers win an unprecedented 3 consecutive NFL championships in 1929, 1930, and 1931, Lambeau had grown tired of McNally's quirks and antics and sold the talented yet eccentric halfback to the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1934. After just 1 miserable season in Pittsburgh, McNally was desperate to rejoin Lambeau's Packers. Nicknamed the Vagabond Halfback for his propensity for traveling free by stowing himself on freight trains rather than buying passenger tickets, McNally would ride the blinds, hobo style, in between the coupled ends of freight cars to his destinations from city to city. According to legend, that is precisely how the star halfback reached Chippewa Falls to play for the Marines that August. Johnny Blood McNally knew the Packers needed him, and had also come to realize he needed Lambeau's Packers. McNally hatched a plan that he would sign 1-game contracts to play for the Packers' upcoming exhibition opponents. He wanted to show Lambeau, in person, that the Packers needed his talents for the upcoming 1935 campaign. The Chippewa Marines were the first team on his list. Born in New Richmond, Wisconsin in 1903, the 31-year-old John McNally was affable and charming and had a penchant for taking on daring, risky, and adventurous undertakings. To keep his college football eligibility, yet still make money playing football on the side, he gave himself the alias Johnny Blood, based on the movie title Blood and Sand, starring Rudolph Valentino, which he saw going past a movie house marquee while speeding on a motorcycle. That way he could save his name, John McNally, for college sports, and use Johnny Blood as his name when playing football for cash. He partied, boozed, and womanized like Babe Ruth, challenged social perceptions and norms like Harry Houdini, and lived each moment to the fullest as if he were John Dillinger. For those who knew him, his presence in Chippewa Falls was vintage Johnny Blood, as he was out to show Lambeau and the Packers what they had been missing. But it wasn't Johnny Blood McNally's play that was the issue. It was the antics that had worn thin on Lambeau. Stories of jumping from hotel ledges, singing from balconies, crawling atop the railroad cars of the team's speeding train after a towel fight with a fellow teammate. Worse, Johnny Blood even entered Lambeau's hotel room through the window to get an advance on his salary. During one contract negotiation, Lambeau tried to curb Blood's drinking and said, "I'll pay you $110 a game if you stop drinking by Tuesday each week." The star countered, "Make it Wednesday and you can pay me a flat $100. Later in life, Johnny Blood explained the complexity of his relationship with Lambeau. Curly didn't completely understand me, but then Blood added, I don't perfectly understand myself. Years later, George Clooney's character in the movie Leatherheads was loosely based on Blood's antics and personality. After a week of training at Glenlock, Coach Rolls felt his team was ready for the big Labor Day matchup, or as ready as they would ever be. By game day, Rolls' Chippewa Marines roster complement was filled with 28 players, mostly young men from Wisconsin and Minnesota. Local Chippewa Falls favorites Hoot Mells and Swede Anderson also made the team. In addition to the star power supplied by Johnny Blood McNally were the addition of two talented Big Ten Conference halfbacks, Jimmy Donaldson from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Clint Rybeth from the University of Minnesota. On Sunday morning, the day before the big game, Coach Curly Lambeau rolled into Chippewa Falls with his confident roster of 29 Green Bay Packers. Just the night before, Lambeau's gridiron crew had dominated the first of the four semi-professional teams on the team's barnstorming tour. The Packers had steamrolled Merrill's From Foxes 34-0. On Sunday afternoon, the Packers held an open-to-the-public practice on the new football field at the Northern Wisconsin State Fairgrounds. The Packers' roster was loaded with premium talent, 9 of which would be enshrined in the team's future Hall of Fame in Green Bay. They included Nate Berriger, Hank Bruder, Paul Tiny Engebretson, Lon Evans, Milton Gantenbeim, Charles Buckets Goldenberg, Chester Swede Johnston, Joe Laws, and Bobby Monette. An additional 7 men would join them in the team's Hall of Fame, but were also enshrined in the eventual National Football League's Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. They included Arnie Herber, Clark Hinkle, Cal Hubbard, Don Hutson, Curly Lambeau, Mike Michalski, and Johnny Blood McNally, now playing for the Marines. As Lambeau intensely monitored the movements of his players during their practice, the coach's attention kept reverting back to his newly signed rookie. Nicknamed the Alabama Antelope due to his size and exceptional speed, Donald Montgomery Hudson, or Don Hutson, was late in joining the team due to his participation in the College All-Star Game. After Hudson's graduation, Lambeau bet big on the youth by signing him to a record contract that would pay him $300 a game, or $6,950 in today's valuation. To hide this from the rest of his other jealous players, Lambeau paid him with 2 game checks, each totaling $150 from 2 different banks. Lambeau's plan was to play him towards the end of the game as both a receiver on offense and a safety on defense. Curly needed Hudson to become the player he thought he was going to be if he wanted to win another championship. Chippewa Falls was set to be Don Hudson's first game as a professional athlete. The weather on that Labor Day Monday was mostly sunny with air temperatures around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Gates to the event opened at 12 o'clock noon, with kickoff slated for 2 p.m. that afternoon. Anticipating a possible overflow crowd, the fair set up an additional 2,000 seats, with maximum capacity in and around the grandstand now estimated at 10,000. As spectators and ticket holders arrived, they were entertained by the Chippewa Falls High School Band, as well as the local American Legion's Auxiliary Drum and Bugle Corps. Local media reported conflicting attendance numbers, with the Eau Claire Leader-Telegram claiming that 7,500 had attended the game, while the local Chippewa Herald-Telegram cited figures at a respectable yet underwhelming 3,400. Both newspapers did agree, however, that as each team arrived to the fairgrounds, that both looked well practiced and in fine shape to play. As the game began, it became apparent that it was going to be a grueling defensive affair. The Marines were much better than the Merrill From Foxes, at least on paper. Johnny Blood McNally was the Marines' quarterback, and Coach Rolls had him slated to play every snap in the entire game on both the Marines' offense and defense. In the first quarter, starting at their own 20-yard line, Johnny Blood broke loose off his right tackle and sped through the Packers' secondary for a 30-yard run near midfield. Packers coach Lambeau could easily be seen fuming over the matter as he yelled at his defense, while Blood reveled in what would be the longest yardage single play of the entire game. The Packers responded and held firm, forcing Blood and the Marines to punt the ball away. The first score in the defensive matchup came late in the first quarter, as Bob Monette kicked a field goal from the 18-yard line, and at the end of the first quarter, it was Packers 3 and Marines 0. Both offenses continued their struggles throughout the second quarter. In particular, 2 missed field goals attempted by the Packers and future NFL Hall of Famer Clark Hinkle. Coach Lambeau's displeasure mounted as fans observed a noticeable nervousness envelop his demeanor as his vaunted Packers were letting the pesky Marines hang around in this fight. At the end of the second quarter, the game was still locked at Packers 3 and Marines 0. While the Chippewa Falls High School Band and American Legion supplied halftime entertainment to the crowd, both Coach Rolls and Coach Lambeau could be heard strategizing with their respective players. At one point, an animated Lambeau shouted, "What's the matter with you guys? Here you are supposed to be professional football players, and you're letting this bunch of farmers push you all around." One of the Packers retorted, "Here's my helmet. You go in there. Those guys are some pretty good football players." Lambeau wasn't having any of it, and he told his team they had better pick it up in the second half. As both teams entered the third quarter, the offenses continued to stall as the defensive battle raged into the late afternoon hours, including an interception thrown by Arnie Herber to Johnny Blood. Former Marine Hank Bannock recalled, "That Blood sure did play hard. We were glad to have him." As the game wore on, Lambeau's penchant for giving fiery and motivational speeches from the sidelines began to pay off. As Bannock recalled, in the second half, the Packers showed the spirit that they ought to have had. Late in the third quarter, the Packers' offense showed life as they scored their first touchdown on a pass thrown by Henry Bruder, followed by an extra point made by Bob Monette. At the end of 3 quarters, the Packers had 10 and the Marines 0. In the final quarter of football, 2 costly mistakes on the same drive sealed the game's fate. Marines halfback Rybeth muffed a punt deep in Marines territory, yielding valuable field position. Just plays later, the Packer defenders partially blocked a Marines punt by Johnny Blood, putting the Packers' offense near scoring range. Packers' Clark Hinkle would run it in for a touchdown from 5 yards out, but then went on to miss the extra point, which irritated Lambeau to no end. It was his third missed kick of the day, and Lambeau had taken notice. The Packers led 16-0. With the game now largely in hand, Lambeau wanted to give his rookies some valuable reps on the field. Don Hutson, the Alabama Antelope, his presence on the field that day left an immediate impression. Despite getting little playing time in Chippewa Falls, one spectator recalled, "I never saw a guy run so fast and with such precision. He stood out amongst everyone out there." One Marine who was forced to cover Hudson recalled, "I had him right in front of me, and then he was gone." Another spectator remembered how Hudson had been surrounded by 4 Marines when he leaped high to catch the ball, then came down, spun around all of them, and was gone. He was a game breaker, and I don't know how he did it. Hudson's first catches as a professional football player helped set up the final score of the game, as Arnie Herber threw a touchdown pass to Milton Gantenbein. A blocked extra point by the Marines would set the final score at Packers 22, Marines 0. Every player on both rosters had an opportunity that day to play, including local stars Hoot Mells and Sweet Anderson. Each player on the Marines was paid $25, or $578 in today's valuation. It's not known if Johnny Blood earned more than the rest of the Marines. In the immediate aftermath, local press coverage hailed the high-level performance and valiant effort displayed by the Chippewa Marines. For 2.5 quarters, they had held a championship-caliber professional football team to just 3 points on their home field, a truly stunning and impeccable feat. Although the future seemed to look bright for the Marines, it was not to be. Several key players, including Johnny Blood, had only signed up to play against the Packers and did not return to the Marines. As a result, the performance of their on-field products suffered mightily as they finished their semi-professional season in 1935 with a 4-4-2 record, by far the worst in the franchise's history. Playing the Packers also proved to be both a blessing and a curse, as fan interest in the team waned after their loss. As Lambeau's team finished their barnstorming tour by squashing Stevens Point and La Crosse, they inadvertently diminished the semi-professional game while expanding the legitimacy of their own. Any remaining fan notion that their local team could compete with the big leagues was largely gone, 1935 was the final season for the Marines, until a short revival of the brand resurfaced in Chippewa Falls after World War II. Today you can view numerous historical items from the Marines at the Chippewa Area History Center next to Irvin Park in downtown Chippewa Falls. Curly Lambeau's barnstorming tour through Wisconsin had been a success for his team, the only speed bump in the road being those pesky Chippewa Marines up in Chippewa Falls in western Wisconsin. But there was also the matter of Johnny Blood to deal with. According to legend, Blood left Chippewa Falls by freight train as only a man named Vagabond Halfback could, and made his way to La Crosse to sign with the Loggers. He had one last opportunity to impress Lambeau, and he wasn't going to let that pass him by. Despite the fact that the Loggers were obliterated in that game, Blood played well. Days after the La Crosse game, Curly Lambeau offered Johnny Blood a new contract, and he was safely back in the fold of his former team. As Blood later surmised, Curly wanted to see him and Hutson play together, side by side in the backfield. The Packers would go on to finish second in 1935, but eventually win the franchise's fourth NFL championship with Blood and Hutson in 1936. During his time as head coach, Curly Lambeau won the first 6 of the Packers' current NFL record of 13 championships. Looking back on the fateful Packers and Marines game in 1935 in Chippewa Falls, it is often portrayed as the game when Johnny Blood played Don Hutson. But in reality, it was a moment in time when Curly Lambeau got to visualize in real time the true potential his team would have once a refocused Johnny Blood was back on his roster alongside the upstart talent of Don Hutson. In his 11 years as a receiver, Don Hutson transformed the position and became the most statistically dominant player in NFL history, leading league-wide statistical categories against his peers of his era, a record 33 times. Today in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the team indoor training facility is named the Don Hutson Center in his honor. As for Johnny Blood, his 1936 championship would be his last year as a Green Bay Packer. He went on to coach the professional Pittsburgh Pirates, the precursor to the Steelers, shortly after. Blood, Lambeau, Hubbard, and Hutson were all inducted together in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, as part of their inaugural class in 1963. Blood retired to Palm Springs, California, and lived there until his death in 1985. He died at the age of 82. In lieu of a formal burial, the family erected a personal stone in the family plot of Immaculate Conception Catholic Cemetery in his hometown of New Richmond, Wisconsin. If you happen to go see Johnny Blood, make sure that you drive. It might be too risky to go by freight train.
Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this episode of Hidden Chippewa Valley with John Kinville, the Chippewa Marines versus the Green Bay Packers. And as always, if you could subscribe to my channel, like this video, it would be greatly appreciated. I also want to thank my good buddy, Ryan Metzenbauer. We graduated together at Chi High in 1997, and he's got all of this cool stuff. Nobody in this city collects more Chippewa memorabilia than that guy. He's terrific, and I appreciate it, Ryan. And as always, until next time, never forget that together we become witnesses to the past, and we keep their stories alive.
Ready? Pretty crazy to think that Don Hutson, Cal Hubbard, Curly Lambeau. Are you a Packer fan, naturally?
Yep.
No kidding. Who's your favorite Packer of all time?
W. White.
Good choice. And who? Oh, did you watch that documentary on him?
No, not the whole thing.
It was is really cool.